Hello, Internet. Welcome here. We're glad for you. When I was in South Africa, this is beginning to sound like Rhodesians. We used to call them the when-we's when we were in Rhodesia. And just a joke. But when I was in South Africa earlier this year, we went to a farm in the Kalahari. And we recorded quite a few people, the videos. Some of you have seen, a lot of them you will still have to see in the future. But we were not alone. There were actually people there from KwaZulu-Natal government, specifically in the form of Reinhard Hartzenberg. And they've got a wonderful program going where they record people of all colors, all tribes, all everything, where they don't discriminate at all. And then these people tell them their story. And then it goes into an archive for future historians to use, or people who want to see it. And we were very grateful for Reinhard there because he's an expert cameraman, soundman, got fantastic equipment, of course. And he was kind enough to take me and Papa Whiskey at his Peter Williams, as well as Peter McRae and myself. He was kind enough to drive us all the way from Durban to the Kalahari Desert, which you can think is quite a trip. And we had a lot of fun on the way. And so while Andrew and myself was recording some people, Reinhard was recording as well. And now they've kindly gave us access to their recordings. And this is what this coming video is about. Now, it might be in Afrikaans, it might be in English, but it's very well done. Some of them you might have seen before on Legacy, where we made double interviews. But, no interview is ever the same. Conversation is always different because there's some different aspects. So yeah, here we are. Have a look. And then in the description, I will leave a link to this remarkable place where you can go and look at many, many thousands of other recordings as well, and see if you can support these people. We always anti-government. Whatever they do, we say is nonsense, and mostly that's true. But yes, one of the efforts which I think praiseworthy and should be continued.
Good evening, it's the 28th of March 2023 and we're at Toevlug Farm near Uppington. This evening I have the honor and privilege of having someone that I served with in 3 different units, in 32 Battalion's Reconnaissance Wing, in 1 Southwest African Reconnaissance Regiment, and at Chief Staff Intelligence. Koen, tell us about your early life and how you ended up in the army. Sê net jou volle name.
Koen Riekert, ek is gebore in Johannesburg in 1960 en ek het groot geword en al my jare gebly in Johannesburg. En soos almal in Suid-Afrika destyds in 1977 opgeroep na die verdiensplig. Na een Suid-Afrikaanse Infanteriebattalion toe in Bloemfontein. Ek het begin Januarie aangemeld vir verdiensplig by een Infanteriebattalion. En ek onthou die plek was baie mistroostige omgewing. Ek is op massiewe basis met duisende mense wat rond daar, ek nie 'n boom in sig nie. En ek het nie, ek was nie maar kon laat bly nie. Ek het in my laaste jaar in skool op stadium op televisie, ons het net televisie gekry in die huis destyds, program gesien oor valskermbataljon. En nogal baie indruk gewees en ek het gedink ek wil so toe gaan. En net toe die geleentheid gekry toe ek aan Bloemfontein aankom, daar ons so 'n week daar by die infanterie in Bloemfontein voor die valskermbataljon span oorgestuur het om mense te kom werf om valskermbataljon te gaan, maar dit was 'n volunteer eenheid. Jy kon nie vra om so te gaan nie, jy moes it's a volunteer unit, you have to be selected to go there. Hulle toe gekom met klein spannie daar, 'n paar voorlopige toetse gedoen, bietjie fiksheid, bietjie aptitude. En ek was gelukkig om dit te slaag en het na so 'n week omtrent by een SA infanteriebataljon ons as 'n groep valskermbataljon doen. Ons het daar omtrent 'n week spandeer gewag vir mense wat van al die ander eenhede in Suid-Afrika gekom het, ook nou wat valskermbataljon te wou kom. Ek onthou ek was van die eerste mense wat aangekom het. Die bataljon was totaal leeg, so ons het daar met 'n Bedford lorry aangekom. En begin uitrusting trek, die tipe van goed, maar daar was nog geen opleiding of enigiets betrokke nie. Met die tyd was al die ander eenhede of al die mense van die ander eenhede in Suid-Afrika allemaal opgedaag. En basiese opleiding het begin. Wat nou kan nie onthou, ek dink is 'n 12 weke siklus gewees destyds wat jy jou basiese militêre opleiding doen met baie beradige drill en involved a lot of drill, basic skills, camouflage and concealment, that sort of thing. 12 weeks later, then the parachuting phase started. You do the 2-week physical selection course, which is fairly tough. And then the jumping course, which is also 2-3 weeks maybe. Can't remember that. I think it's
3 weeks.
3 weeks. I managed to get through that. And then what would happen to the rifle companies after the jumping phase, you would go and do a conventional warfare phase in Bloemfontein, just outside Bloemfontein. But just then, there was another selection or an opportunity where they asked for volunteers to go to the Pathfinder company. En die padvinders is 'n bietjie meer wat dit behels is 'n bietjie meer gespesialiseerde opleiding. Waar jy verwag word om in kleiner groepe te werk. Dit is nie soos in die companies waar jy nou 3 peloton het, die normale tipe militêre omgewing. Dit is meer kleiner spanne, verkenningstipe van werk gespesialiseer in. En die opleiding het behels dat ou 'n bietjie meer gespesialiseerde opleiding kry, onder andere goed soos medies, sein, detailed medies en sein kursusse. Voor lugbeheer wat samewerking met die lugmagbeheer aan vliegtuie beheer om aanvalle te doen op die grond of om valskermsoldate af te gooi op spesifieke lokasies. Lugfoto vertolking, tipe van goed wat waar jy behulpsaam was as jy nou operasies sou beplan om detail te kry uit kaarte uit. Ons het 'n klein taktiek kursus moes doen wat by die spesiale magte basis in die Caprivi aangebied was destyds. Dit was net 'n bietjie meer detail oor om in kleiner spanne te werk van 4, 6, 8 man in plaas van 'n peloton van 36. En baie navigasie behels om baie immediate action drills, as jy kontak sou kry in 'n klein span om uit te kom uit so 'n situasie uit. Verkenningstipe werk, kleiner spanne werk. Ons het dit toe klaargemaak, dit was hier in Augustus rondomtrent in 1979 en was toe gekwalifiseer as padvinder. Kan nie onthou spesifiek hoeveel ons begin het mee, want op daai stadium was daar so 15 seker van ons wat nou operasioneel ontplooibaar was. Relatief klein groepie. Ons eerste ontplooiing was na destyds was Rhodesian, Zimbabwe was nog Rhodesian natuurlik, en ons is Soto, ek was Soto ontplooi saam met 'n groep van valskermbataljon. Aanvanklike aanwending was glad nie padvinder werk nie, dit was wat hy refer to as fire force work, waar hulle observasieposte uitgeplaas het en vyand is geïdentifiseer waar hulle sou loop, en dan as 'n groep geïdentifiseer was, ons ingevlieg met helikopters om die ons aan te val. Ons het dit gedoen vir so van November maand omtrent in 1979, soos Rhodesia toe, en dan tot Maart maand in 1980 het hulle die verkiesing gehad, wat vir soos verwag was nie in ons guns was nie, en ons is almal daar die dag na die verkiesing, ons is almal uit Suid-Afrika toe onttrek, om nooit weer terug te gaan nie. Na dit is ons in Suidwes-Afrika ontplooi, van Ontangwa af, meestal. Vlak verkenning in Suid-Angola. Nie vreeslik opwinding daar beleef wat ek kan onmiddellik onthou nie. En dit was totdat ons uitgeklaar het of die militêre diensplig voltooi het in Desember van 1980. Ek is toe uit die weermag uit en by die myn gaan werk in Suid-Afrika goudmyn. Ek wou gaan geologie studeer. Dit het ek redelik gou agtergekom, is nie regtig van my nie. En in die tyd dat ek by die Battalion was, het ek met ons operasies het ek mense tegengekom in die operasionele gebied, onder andere mense van 32 Battalion. En ek het gesien dat die mense is betrokke in die oorlog omtrent op 'n daaglikse basis. Hulle was aktief omtrent in elke operasie wat ek kan onthou was daarvan die mense daar. En hulle het vir my professioneel voorgekom en ek gedink dis nogal iets wat ek so graag wil doen. Wat ek toe wel gedoen het later, na ek nou by die myn weg is, het ek besluit om by 'n 3 jaar korttermyn of 'n kort dienskontrak te teken. En ek is 32 Battalion toe. As 'n individu, ek het nie as 'n groep gegaan nie. In Pretoria die kontrak geteken en op my eie stoom in Rhondo aangekom waar die hoofkwartier was. Daar aangekom met niemand geweet van my, nie geweet ek kom nie. So half onwelkom gevoel.
Wat die jaar was dit?
Dit was 82.
82.
Junie maand, ongeveer Junie maand 1982. Nietemin, ek is die 2B het my ingeroep en ek is ingesweer daar in Rhondo. En kort onderhoud gehad met hom en na die vorige ondervinding met die pad van die agtergrond het hy gevra waar ek wil gaan. Ek het nie geweet daar as 'n opsie nie, ek het net geweet van Buffalo. Ek het nie eens geweet daar as 'n verkenningsgroep nie. En hy het toe vir my gesê ek gaan verkenningsgroep. Ek het nie as gevolg van my agtergrond. Ek was meer more suitable for that sort of work. En ek is op behou nie toe, wat ek ook nie geweet het van nie. Totaal in die ander rigting is van Buffalo. Maar in elk geval ons het toe met 'n buffelsien toe gery, dag of 2 later seker. By Oumahony aangekom en weer eens niemand het geweet ek kom nie. Ek is so verbaas geweest, gedink hulle sou weet van my, maar niemand het nie. Ek is gevat na die bevelvoerder te gaan ontmoet en ek kan nie onthou wie dit was nie, maar in elk geval toe ek nou by die persoon sien, wat nou destyds kaptein Willem Ratte was, het ek nogal gewonder waarvoor ek myself ingelaat het, en hy het nou glad nie gelyk na die tipe van ou wat ek weet nie wat ek verwag het nie, maar dit was nie hy nie, of wat ek gesien het nie. Hy het 'n stoor uitgekom met kortbroek en tikkies en 'n t-shirt en hande en arms vol olie en 'n bril. Maar sedert daai tyd is ek een van die mense wat ek seker die meeste respek voor het in die wêreld, net as gevolg van sy professionaliteit en sy manier van goed doen. En 'n lang storie kort te maak, ek het toe begin ingeval in die opleiding van die verkenningsvleuel. Hulle het in 2 groepe gewerk, destyds een was ontplooi, een het opleiding gedoen. En dan het hulle so geroteer. En toe my beurt om te roteer dit was my kering by die verkenningsvleuel. Ek het nie 'n fisiese kering gedoen nie, ek is net in 'n span ingedeel en dit was die kering. Jy moes 'n operasie doen. En ons was so 6 man in die span na eerste operasies en dan is jy geëvalueer deur die 5 ander ouens in die span. As jy nou terugkom. En ek het duidelik daarop term deurgekom. Ek was aanvaar en met na 3 maande is jy dan nou 'n volwaardige tipe van lid van die eenheid. As jy nie hier sou maak of nie aanvaar word deur die span nie, dan is jy eenvoudig net weggestuur en jy weet nie waar so ek gegaan het nie, maar ek het toe nou dan daardeur gekom. Ek het so in die tyd met 32 baie geleer. By nie net die mense om my nie, maar dit van feitlik alles fasette van onkonvensionele oorlogvoering het ek daar geleer, en ons is konstant ontplooi, en dit is absolute ondervinding wat my dink gevorm het in 'n groot mate die jare daar. So ek was van so middel 82 af daar tot hier na die einde van 84. Ek kan nie onthou presies wanneer dit gebeur het, maar die eenheid is ontpunt in my tyd daar. En ek was die volle tyd daar.
Thanks.
Okay, just continuing from before, we were, as a unit, we actually became one Southwest African reconnaissance regiment. Same people, same base. We didn't move initially. We all remained where we were, and were joined with by a number of people from South African Special Forces. The commander was changed. He was a commandant then, I think, Billy Snyder. And things continued pretty much in a similar fashion initially. Not so many operations anymore, because we now had to retrain and reorganize, so the operation part of it scaled right down. Before we deployed almost constantly, it was now like a lull. There was a time where we had people coming in and trying to find a system where people could work together and teams were organized. I can't remember exactly how long we stayed in Namani before we moved to Maruru, was it?
Ja.
So
Kransberg.
we were in Rundu as well for a while. I can't remember the detail, but ons was rukkie in Rundu gebly, maar in elk geval die hele groep, ons basis by 32 was vir 'n paar jaar, in die eerste paar maande van Swaretjie we gave it up, we left. En toe is ons almal as 'n groep om Maruru toe van alle plekke. Kransberg, suid van Maruru, omtrent 20 km ou myn dorpie. Wat lekker was aanvanklik, maar dit was 'n bietjie onprakties in die sin van ons nou 400 km seker van die grens operasionele gebied af, bietjie uitvoering uit. Ook bietjie tande gesluit daar in die sin van store opsit, die tipe van goed, die logistiek van die hele operasie, dit bietjie tyd gevat. Ons het 'n paar kursusse moes doen in daai tyd. Die van ons wat van 32 afgekom het, moes by om nou te kwalifiseer as Suid-Afrikaanse of Suid-Wes-Afrikaanse spesiale magte, moes ons dink 3 kursusse doen. Wateroriëntering en lange baan, boot tipe van werk, lugoriëntering in Durban en Toekodoek.
Stedelik.
En dan klein taktiek. Dit is my tweede keer dat ek het doen. Ek het met die padvinders gedoen, ek het het weer gaan doen weer op toppies. Bietjie langer hierdie keer. Ons kursus die eerste keer was vir 6 weke en hierdie keer is nou 8 weke kursus plus 2 weke in Durban stedelike klein taktiek addisioneel wat ek nie voorheen gedoen het nie. Dit het 'n paar maande gevat en ons was toe almal terug in Maruru toe en was operasioneel aangewend. Kan 2 spesifieke operasies onthou, waar ons aan die weste in die Kokerveld ontplooi te voet oor die Connecticut rivier, oorsteking gedoen het, daar te ou verdrink daar, sadly, in die proses. En op voet daar gewerk vir 'n tyd, nie vreeslik enigiets noemenswaardig gebeur daar nie. Die tweede een het ons met voertuie ontplooi in die meer sentrale gebied, tussen Onjiba en Zangongo noord opgery. Molongo rivier, as ek reg onthou, waar is Molongo? Kon nie spesifiek aan die dorp op die rivier. In die omgewing gewerk, ons het daar 'n basis gebombardeer, ons het ons geïdentifiseer oor die rivier een hand en daar was 'n bietjie aksie. Niks vreeslik noemenswaardig nie. En ek kan ook nie onthou hoe lank swaar verkenningsregiment gehou voor dit ontbind was, nie onthou dit.
87, end of 87.
Ja, so dit was 3 jaar, dus die eenheid ook ontbind vir hier is wat ek nie wil ingaan op nie, want ek het nie al die detail nie. En soos voorheen was daar weer 'n uitkoms, ons het as 'n groep weer, of meeste van die groep, van die ouens wat met ons saam was, baie stadium was terug SA spesmagte toe, en van die ander van ons is kolonel Jan Breitenbach het op 'n stadium daar by Muur, so waar ons in die interim gesit het, aangekom en hy het mense gesoek vir die guerrilla oorlogvoeringsskool wat hy daar in die Kaperu bestuur het op baie stadium. En so 'n handjie vol van ons is sin toe, omtrent 6 of 7 persone, kan nie spesifiek onthou nie, vir 'n klein groepie van ons is sin toe, as instructeur. That was been end of 86, 87 maybe, somewhere. Dit was 'n paar jaar wat ons daar gebly het, toe vir my baie aangename tyd was, alhoewel ek nie persoonlik enige operasionele werk gedoen het op in daai hele tyd nie, van die ouens het ontplooi elders. Ek het opleiding gedoen die hele tyd, meestal demolisie georiënteerde goed, en ek het 'n demolisie agtergrond gehad. Maar die omgewing was wonderlik, it's like living in a game park, it was lovely. That also came to an end, and when was that? 89, eh? 89. I went briefly to an area in the northern Transvaal with a group of people that we had trained. They were deployed. I was transferred to Pretoria to a desk, which was the worst time of my military career, I think. Totally not suitable for it. I didn't want to be there. One good thing about it, we deployed to places like the Comores and I think Uganda. It was Uganda, yeah. To train people. So we did a bit of travelling in that time, so that made it worthwhile, but otherwise I was pretty much bored and frustrated. Just before the elections in '94, I decided that I didn't want to be part of the SADF anymore, and I left just before the elections, '93, not knowing really where I was going. I did, as before, something came up. As a civilian, Denel had just then started commercial demining in Mozambique initially. And in my time in the military still, I liaised with Denel. I was like, what is the word for detached duty? I was actually working at Denel for Mekin as a military person still at the time. They did research and development basically. So I knew all the people there, and they were looking for people to go and do demining in Mozambique, and I had the explosives background, so I walked into the job straight out of the army, which is brilliant. Paid a lot more as well. And I stayed basically with that, not with Mekin, but in that line of work for the next almost 25 years. Until literally last year when I retired. And here I am, retired. Briefly my military career and what came after, not detailed, but where I was and when I was, how long I spent there. So anything else,
Okay,
I'll try and answer.
let's just recap on a few things. First of all, let's jump all the way back to 1 Parachute Battalion, Pathfinders. You went to Rhodesia. What was Rhodesia like? Where did you deploy? What did you do?
I loved it there because it's different than one would expect from being deployed to Angola, like everybody else. It was different. I liked the country, I liked the people in the country. Our work initially was just, like I said, fire force. So we would be dealt into 3, what we refer to as waves. The first one being on standby, literally kitted up, ready to go in a minute. So the siren goes, the OP identifies a target, the siren goes, you get into the chopper, helicopters, South African Air Force helicopters, Pumas. You flew into an area, they were dropped off as stopper points. We had an aeroplane with a commander in the air controlling the sweep lines. and you search and destroy. Pretty simple. Depending on the target, sometimes there were more enemy were identified during the initial contacts, and more people were required. A second wave would then be deployed. As soon as the first wave goes, the second wave gets into the first, that sort of thing. And we had 3 of those. And I don't think once or twice all 3 of those waves were deployed. So very exciting times. If you can call it nice warfare, then that was it, because you were out in the morning, back in the afternoon for a meal, a hot meal. Very seldom did we stay overnight, once or twice maybe. But that was easy work for us, because you didn't spend a lot of time walking massive amounts of distances. You went in and out. It was exciting times. So that was lovely. But it was in the initial phase only. Towards, as we went into 1980, that changed a bit as well. The fire force was sort of on halt. It was all what they call the communist terrorists, the Charlie Tangos, were drawn into assembly points prior to the elections. And so the fire force work sort of dried up, and we did operational OPs, operational post until March, when the election was lost, and we had to withdraw. That was Rhodesia, but I loved it there. Would have loved to continue there, but it didn't work out that way.
Okay, good. Let's go back to 32 Battalion Reconnaissance Wing. Just shortly tell us what the living conditions was in the base in Amahoni, and what life was like, what was discipline, what was the general routine?
Living conditions was fairly rustic. It was certainly not luxury. We had little wooden bashers. It was sort of sunk into the ground about a meter or so. Homemade stuff. The people before me actually built it themselves. It wasn't like well-constructed buildings. It was like rustic initially. Routine was, when I got there initially, early morning you got up, went for a run. After the run, straight to the shooting range for an exercise, a bit of a competition thing. All sorts of different weapons. So we knew all the foreign weapons very well, because we used it daily. After that, into base, have a shower, have breakfast, actually a brunchy thing. And then into whatever training was going on at the time. If it was a rehearsal for an operation, that would be taking place then. There's always something going on. If it wasn't an imminent operation going, then Willem would find something for us to do. Whatever it was either a medical refresher or a signals exercise, stuff like that. Navigation exercise, escape innovation exercise. Constantly busy. Brunch time, about 11ish. We had a siesta then. That was good, like a 2-hour thing in the afternoon. There was a break. Afternoon, the same again. Retraining, planning, preparation, same sort of thing. And in the evenings you would have a break and go into the bar for a few beers. Amahoni was a fairly secluded place. I mean, you couldn't go out at night, obviously. It was just on the border between Kavango and Ngombeland, if I'm not mistaken. Not miles away from any civilization, so you were in the base all the time, so you couldn't go out anywhere. There was no contact with people outside. There was obviously no telephones or radios or anything then to speak to people at home. So you went in there and you were there for months. Operational and back to Amahoni, operational and back to Amahoni. You only went out of there to go on a course in South Africa or go on leave. 2 weeks at a time normally. I remember spending months away from home, not taking leave on it, not having leave for very long periods of time. Operations was a level up from what I was used to before, because this is now long deployments. Weeks on end, patrolling, reconnaissance type of work. Initially, I was more concerned about being accepted into the teams than really with the situation about the enemy or anything like that. It was, you had to succeed, and you were judged by your peers. That was, for me, initially it was just to make a grade. It was very important to me. And I was fairly proud when after about 3 operations I was given the permission to have a beret made. You weren't issued a beret because there wasn't any issue. We had a resident tailor in Angola with a sewing machine, and he made you a beret. You give him mine is still the old SAP camouflage beret. I mean, you give him the shirt and he makes you a beret. So when I got that, I was fairly chuffed. And that continued for 2 years or so that I spent in Oman. It was a lot of operational work. We were out more often than not.
So when you say more out than not, how often would that be?
Well, I can't say exactly it varied, but the companies, the rifle companies, they had a system where they worked on, I think there were about 6 companies at the time. They worked on a 6-week rotation. They went deployed for 6 weeks, half of them, or half the battalion deployed for 6 weeks, wherever, various areas. The other half was in Buffalo, doing retraining, going on leave, doing courses in South Africa, that sort of thing. Come back, you go 6 weeks into the bush, to wherever they were deployed to. Now, we didn't quite work like that. We just deployed when necessary, where necessary. It was often more than 6 weeks, and very seldom did we spend 6 weeks in Amoni. I don't think I ever spent 6 weeks in Amoni at any time, even 2 weeks. It was a lot of operational work. I think in '93, around about there, we were operating from Monjiva, which is 40 kilometers into Angola. That was our rest and recreation base. We went back there, we didn't even go to Amoni. We went back there, regrouped and deployed again. I can't put time to it, but I mean, it was 70%, I was 60 or 70% of the time in the bush. In that time, I think. Exciting times, good operations, some disappointments, but I think we had a lot of success, and it was, like I said, it was, that's the time in my military career, operational-wise, that I treasure the most. Time with 32 Battalion.
Cheers, Koen.
There you go.
What Koen alludes to is that he was actually an operational signaller, and that he was an operational medic all at once. And just to highlight that point, just tell us about the incident we had at Aquanemba Point when we found an enemy base and they chased us. Just that short one little incident.
It was a shootout, yeah?
No, shootout.
Yeah, I don't remember the name Aquanemba Point so well, but I remember the operation, of course. We deployed into, that was during Operation Askari, which is a fairly big operation, but our part in it was as usual, working in a fairly small team. I think we were about 8 then, because a fairly reinforced team. But, quite a bit of firepower, fortunately. This was in, must have been December of 1983, the rainy season. It was raining constantly. I remember being wet all the time. And we reached an area where the enemy was obviously in the vicinity, because the signs were all there. And we were leaving tracks all over the place. You couldn't hide your tracks. We knew it was not long before we were going to be compromised, and we were expecting trouble. And as it happened, it wasn't long before that was coming. We on this particular day, we were walking and trying to look for a place where we could lie up during the day hours, and not finding a suitable place because the vegetation was sort of limited, and it wasn't ideal for us to find proper cover. We found a spot that was the best of the worst, and we went in there to lie up for the day. Now, we had various drills that we followed when you went into cover like that in an area like that where contact was almost imminent. I carried claymore mines in my backpack, which is a anti-personnel, anti-group mine, which we used as a, call it the first line of defense. If you lie up during the day, you would put these mines out 25 or 30 meters outside of where you are, and if the enemy approaches, you would detonate that and fortunately or hopefully kill a few of them and then put them on the back foot to give you time to either gain the initiative or to escape and evade. We had put the mines out. We also put one of our people out on a bit of an angle to give us an early warning when the enemy arrives. Should they arrive, and it wasn't long before they actually did. Actually, in the late afternoon, they did finally track us down. And a guy called Daintjie Venter, Varkies, and now we called him Varkies. He was the guy outside, and the cover was such I couldn't personally see anything. I just heard the firing start from where Varkies was, and he was sort of between us and the enemy, and the fire from the enemy came right past him and into right between us. He fired a few shots. I think he killed one of the guys. Eventually, I blew the. As soon as he came back, we couldn't really return fire in that direction it was coming from because he was outside. We knew he was on sort of in front of us. And he came crawling back at speed without a rifle. He said his rifle had been shot out of his hands, which I don't think was actually the case, but he had blood coming from his side of his face here. So found out later there was a bit of a sandblast. The bullet hit the ground right next to him, and the sandblast hit him in the face. As soon as he came in, I blew the mines, and there was a bit of a lull in fire, fortunately. So Varkies then asked me to give me my rifle to him. I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, I obviously didn't. I had a second weapon, the M79 grenade launcher, which I think I let him have, but he couldn't use it anyhow because the cover was right in front of us. I couldn't use. So he just stayed there with us for a while. When the fire died down, some of the guys went out. They found the one dead guy, the others had all disappeared. But now we knew our cover was blown, and we had to get out, and basically what we were going for was a reconnaissance on an enemy base. That was blown. We couldn't continue with that. HQ decided otherwise. They said we should continue, which we did. Later in the afternoon, last light, sort of, if I remember correctly, we packed up and started walking through the night, the entire night, just to get some distance between us and this area. First light the next morning, the area where we were in was even worse, and we just came from, there was absolutely no cover. We couldn't hide anywhere. There was no ground cover. But we thought we had like a 10-hour start on the enemy at least, because we'd walked through the night. It wasn't, half an hour later, maybe an hour later, we had just put up the radio antenna in this new position to tell the HQ where we were. Thought we had a few hours at least before the enemy catch up with us again. Knowing that they would, it's just a matter of time. But it wasn't that long, it was maybe half an hour or so, I can't remember exactly. But early morning we heard voices again, and they were onto us again. And the shooting started. Wanted to make comms. I remember the first, I don't know still to this day what hit the aerial, but the radio antenna was the first thing to go. So there was no comms initially. It was a fairly intense firefight then, but we were sort of waiting for this, so we were more prepared. And we had heavy firepower, several machine guns and M79s, and we had a guy with us, a Nita guy, he had a rocket launcher. So there was all sorts of fire going backwards and forwards. But we managed to beat them off again. Made comms. None of us fortunately killed. One guy had a bullet going through the middle of his, literally through them, cutting him a middle pike. Very close shave. we all survived and called for help again. This time they actually listened and they said, okay, they will, well, there was some talk about not being able to come, but a Puma did arrive an hour later maybe to pick us up, and we left going back into the HQ. So the reconnaissance on the base was abandoned because we were totally blown. We couldn't have continued. That's the one.
Great. Then we move on to 1 Southwest African Reconnaissance Regiment, and you also alluded to the fact that you were in the small teams and you worked with a very famous guy from Rhodesia called Chris Schulenberg. Just tell us a little bit about the small teams and how you found Chris Schulenberg.
Yeah, the small teams is a concept that was really started in Rhodesia by Chris Schulenberg. He has a reputation, he's an absolute legend. I think he's one of 2 recipients of the Grand Cross of Valor in Rhodesia. He's really a well-known operator with the Selous Scouts in Rhodesia. He came to us in Swareke, and I ended up with him and another guy in what they call the small and offensive reconnaissance teams. Now, personally, we didn't actually do a lot of work like they would have done in Rhodesia at the time. I didn't. But Chris Schulenberg was eccentric, to say the least. He was totally professional. What he knew about small teams, I mean, he started the whole concept. So his way of thinking was initially totally foreign to me. I couldn't figure out sometimes what he was thinking about, and it was initially a bit difficult. A recluse. Chris, people that know him would probably agree, although he's not a group person. He does his own thing, his way. And he was allowed to get away with that in Rhodesia. He was totally given free rein in the Selous Scouts, and it made his successes it's legendary. I mean, there are books written about it. I don't think he had the same leeway in the South African Army. They weren't quite rigged in that sort of thinking. I wasn't, certainly. So I think he was restricted a bit, and so the full potential of the unit, the whole Swareke thing, in my opinion, the full potential was never reached for various reasons. Sadly so, because the people there were of the highest quality. Our own 32 people that I have known for 2 years and longer, plus new guys coming in, they were professional soldiers. But the unit, I don't think, ever reached its full potential. It could have been much more. So when I think about my achievements in the army, Swareke is not at the top of it. It would be 3-2 still. It's unfortunately, it's sadly so, because there's really brilliant people there, but there was no support structure that you would have in South African Special Forces. We didn't have that. We weren't based in the operational area, so we were far away from between. We felt sort of removed from the war a bit. We did a few operations and it was successful, but it could have been much more, my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And then you worked with, you went to Chief Staff Intelligence and you worked with some secret projects. Can you just tell us which projects you worked on? And you also worked under the legendary Colonel Breitenbach, Jan Breitenbach, and just tell us how you found that part of your career.
Now, Colonel Breitenbach, I had known from before. I was in the Pathfinders. I did an Operation Protea. He was the commander of that, which is also a very successful operation and a very enjoyable one for me. We were vehicle-borne cyber operations. That was also one of the highlights of my military career. And when he came to ask for people for the guerrilla warfare school, obviously I jumped at the opportunity because Swareke was gone. Knowing that it is a training job, I thought maybe things will change a bit later. But anyhow, I went. And it's also, like I think I mentioned before, it was like working in a game park. There were elephant and buffalo and maybe all sorts of animals roaming around in our training area. I trained a guerrilla resistance movement from Mozambique. I suppose I can mention that now. Mostly I was involved with them more than anyone else. Mostly demolition work. There were a few of us, only a handful, maybe 4 or 5 of us, based in a remote base. And a couple of hundred of these guys, and we trained them in all sorts of things. Basic guerrilla warfare. For several months. It was like quite a long time there, and they were eventually deployed back into where they were going. I didn't go with them. Would have loved to, but that didn't happen. And that also, again, came to an end. The school was basically closed down. It was towards at the time the SADF was withdrawing from Angola, and all everybody basically went home, including the school closed down, and I went to Pretoria with this group before they deployed. And I was deployed into an office in Liberty Life building in Pretoria, which is not the highlight of my career, unfortunately.
So if we recap, you started your career in Parachute Battalion.
Yeah.
And you left Parachute Battalion as a national serviceman. You joined 44 Parachute Brigade under Colonel Breitenbach. He is a legendary guy.
Yeah.
Then you moved from there to 32 Battalion's Reconnaissance Wing, and you worked with another legendary guy called Willem Rutte for quite a long time. After that, you joined 1 SWA Reconnaissance, and the officer commanding was Willie Snyders, also a famous guy from 101 Battalion. And then within that group, you joined, or you were, you joined the small teams within 1 SWA Reconnaissance, and then you worked with the legendary Koos. So if you can compare those characters and just tell us who you thought the highlight was and how he contributed to your way of thinking and made you a better person you are today. So I'm giving you the dauntless task of choosing which one had the most influence and influenced you the most, and why.
I can't compare between the commands. I've mentioned before in my life, obviously, to other soldiers, that I've been very, very fortunate in my life to work with, number one, Colonel Jan Breitenbach, Captain Rutte at the time, is Major Colonel Rutte now, and Chris Schulenburg, Captain at the time. In their own rights, in their own different spheres, they were all masters of their art. Not only as soldiers, but as people. They all had there's a common thing between all these people. It's not being a commander, and you're there and you're working with this guy and he's here and you treat him as such. None of those people had that. They made you feel like an equal, which of course you weren't even close to, but so I can't compare one is better than the other. Each has a different approach, a different influence on me. The one I spent the most time with in the actual operations would be Willem Rutte. And he had a huge influence on me as a person as well as a human being. So did Jan Breitenbach, massively so. Later years I spent a lot of time under his command, but not so much operationally. It was just, that was training work. But I learned him, I spent a lot of time with him as a person, and he's just no better. Chris Schulenburg I spent less time with, very little time with operationally. He deployed on one operation, I think, with us. But as a person in his own eccentric way, even him, he was a class of his own. So I can't compare or put one above the other. But I was very fortunate, and I think I'm probably, if not the only person, one of very few persons that have worked with all three of those people as closely as I have. And it was I hope it made me a better person. I feel it had. But I just consider myself very fortunate to have just been in the same units, never mind to spend intimate time with these guys. I mean, they were all just several streets ahead of everyone else. Streets ahead.
Goodney, thank you very much. I think it was a very good talk.
Thank you, B.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Lovely stuff, man.